Facts Verse presents. They were tired of paying rent, so they accidentally built a dangerous house. Many people have a different idea of what their dream house would look like. Some have the perfect kind of house in mind, some have the ideal location in mind. Most people choose a typical home in a nice neighborhood, but there are a few people whose idea of a dream house is far from the norm. Just Enough Room Island. A wealthy family built this house in the 1950s. They wanted to get away from the noise and the people in the city, so they bought a tiny island in the middle of the St. Lawrence River. They aptly named the island Just Enough Island, but they didn't seem too worried about flooding. It's actually the smallest inhabited island in the world. When word about this island got out, tourists wanted to take a look at it, and that ruined the seclusion that the home once had. The Hanging Monastery. A monk wanted a quiet, secluded place to pray, so he built a monastery on the side of a mountain. He built it over 1,400 years ago, and it still stands today. Like the house on Just Enough Room Island, when tourists heard about this hanging monastery, it was no longer a secluded location. The monastery is held up by beams that are fit into holes into the stone of the rock's face. Mount Merapi. Despite the fact that Mount Merapi is actually a volcano and the name translates to Fire Mountain, people continue to build homes at the base of it. Scientists do their best to predict when the volcano will erupt, but they're not always right. At any time, deadly clouds of gas, ash, and rock could tumble down the mountain going 60 miles per hour or faster and engulf the houses below in flames. The mountain's located in Indonesia, and about 75,000 people live around it. After the volcanic ash lands, it creates fertile soil, which is why people build around the mountain. People don't live right beside the mountain, but every house within a 10-mile radius is still in a danger zone. This home is one of the volcano's victims. Paradise Island. Paradise Island in the Maldives Islands is a popular tourist destination. The white sandy beaches and the gorgeous water make it a popular vacation spot. Sadly, it's not always going to be this way. With the rising sea levels, the Maldives island could be completely submerged underwater. In 2008, the president of the Maldives asked the residents to move away from the water to keep from losing everything. They're working to build tall, artificial islands that are flood-resistant. The government's hoping that people will move to those islands when their existing homes are in danger. Lake Kivu. There are about 2 million people living on the shore of Lake Kivu, and they are in danger every day. The lake could explode at any time, sending clouds of deadly carbon dioxide into the air. There are also volcanoes nearby. The lake is located on the border of Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. The lake can be compared to what happens when you shake up a can of soda. There are a few natural warning signs the lake is about to explode, and scientists and other experts are working on ways to de-gas the lake by removing the gas from underneath. Meteora Monasteries. This monastery was built in the 14th century, and they were built up on massive pillars to keep from being raided. Back then, the only way the monks could get to the top was by using a hanging basket or a rope ladder. There was also a legend that said that they would fly to the top on the back of an eagle. The view from the top must be terrifying. Sutyagin House. This house was located in Archangel, Russia, and it was owned by a wealthy arms dealer named Nikolai Petrovich Sutyagin. It started off as a 3-story house, but he thought that looked kind of strange, like a mushroom, and because of that he started adding more and more stories to it. He stopped building when it reached 13 floors. It was the tallest wooden building in the world. It even had a 5-story bathhouse. After Nikolai abandoned the house, people believed it was haunted. Teenagers would dare each other to go into the house, and some teenagers mysteriously disappeared. When the government deemed it to be a fire hazard, they tore it down. A Fairy Tale Castle. In the 1800s, Count Wilhelm of Württemberg read a novel with a fictional castle and he wanted one of his own. He had a hunting lodge built on the site of an older castle. Today, it's a very popular wedding destination, but you gotta be careful. The drop from one of the windows is very far down. The Perched House. The architect who built this house named it Takasugian, which translates to a tea house built too high. It looks like something you'd see in a Dr. Seuss book, but this really exists. To build the house, the architect cut down trees and then secured them in the ground. The tops of the trees stick into the house, holding it in place. To get into the house, you got to climb 2 ladders. When you're inside the house, you can sit comfortably, but you'll feel the house swaying gently from side to side. A tiny house on a rock. This house has been on this rock in the Drina River in Serbia for over 40 years. Over the years, the water levels have risen and dropped, but it still remains standing. The owner built the house in 1969 because it looked like a great place to sunbathe. When the house was built, the owner thought it'd be a great place to spend his vacations. Fortunately, the extreme winds and flooding have not taken the house down. At least not yet. A whole Spanish town. This is an entire town located in Catalonia, Spain. It's called Castellfollit de la Roca, and it's about 1,000 years old. It's so incredible that it looks like something from a Disney movie. The town is squeezed into a narrow volcanic rock formation sitting between 2 rivers. The Chemosphere. This house is located in Los Angeles, high in the Hollywood Hills. It was designed by an aerospace engineer. When he designed the house in the 1960s, he created what he thought houses might look like in the 21st century. He must have been pretty upset when the 21st century came and not a single house looked like this. The Katskhi Pillar in Georgia. For over 1,500 years, monks have been climbing these pillars so that they could live in solitude. Maxime Kovtardes lives in the house, and to get inside, he has to climb a 131-foot ladder. He also comes down from the home once or twice a week so that he can counsel those who need help at the monastery below. Before he moved in, there was another monk who lived there and died. When Maxim moved in, the former owner's bones were still there. The Hanging Houses of Cuenca, Spain. This house is located high up in the sky. It's hard to tell where the rock ends and the house begins. The houses were built because as the population in the town grew, they had to build houses as far out and as high up as they could. For a while, the town was full of these hanging houses, but now only a few remain. This is no longer a residential building. Today it houses a museum and a restaurant. The Little House on the Mountain. This little house on the side of a mountain is not owned by any one person. It's located 2 miles up the mountain, and it's there for people to use in case of emergency. If mountain climbers find themselves in a dangerous situation, they can stay at the house to rest or to wait out a storm. The house might look small, but it's actually pretty big, enough to fit 10 people. There's also an emergency phone inside in case you need to call for help. The Leaning High-Rises in Santos, Brazil. These high-rise apartments are located in a great area. They have beautiful ocean views and are within walking distance to the beach. There are about 90 of them in the area, and they lean to the side. The reason that they're not straight is that the foundations aren't deep enough, and they are situated in soft clay. When they were built, the building codes weren't stringent. Today, they'd be required to dig the foundation much deeper into the bedrock. They did fix one building to stand straight up, but it would be too expensive to fix all of them. The Korowai Treehouses. In Indonesia, many of the Korowai people still live in tree houses. They're built like giant birds' nests, and they can house several people. Living in tree houses is not the only strange thing about the Korowai people. Many of them are cannibals, which is, well, that's a lot stranger than a treehouse. The Wazoko Apartments in Amsterdam. The MVRDV is a Dutch architectural firm that faced conflict when trying to meet the client's needs while following city regulations. The building had to be well-lit while keeping as much green space as possible. To meet everybody's needs, the architects stuck these strange protrusions out of the back of the building, and the final result looks like a bureau with the drawers pulled out. The Phoenix House. The Phoenix House is located just outside of a volcano's danger zone. The The volcano is called Kilauea, and it is known as being one of the most active volcanoes in the world. Even though the house is outside the danger zone, if the volcano were to erupt, the lava could still reach the house. You can stay at this solar-powered tiny house by renting it on Airbnb. The question is, would you? Williamsburg Dumpster Apartment. An interior designer named Gregory Clowen created this dumpster house. The retrofitted dumpster contains a sink, toilet, and sleeping area on the inside. Outside there's a shower, a barbecue grill, a minibar, and a rooftop deck. It took the designer 6 months to build and design the house. If you want to stay there, it'll cost you $200 per night. $200 to stay the night in a trash bin. You probably don't even get room service. The most secluded house in the world. This house is located on the island of Aigh, which is off the coast of Iceland. The house is so isolated that if you need food, supplies, or medical attention, you're not going to be able to get any of them. There were 5 families living on the island 300 years ago. They were all puffin hunters. By the 1930s, though, everybody had abandoned the island. The lodge was built for temporary lodging while hunting the puffins. The Falling Water House. The people who had this house built weren't thinking ahead. They were tired of paying rent, so they accidentally built a dangerous house. Frank Lloyd Wright came up with the design, but he didn't think of the engineering aspects. It was built on top of a waterfall, and the materials and colors blend into the Pennsylvania forest. There was one small problem, though. Wright had argued with the engineers, and he got his way. The floors weren't strong enough to hold up the entire building. When the beams started cracking, the owner had to come up with $11 million to fix the problem. It is gorgeous, though. Homes in the Ethiopian Desert. Deep in the Ethiopian desert is a settlement of houses that can only be reached via camel. It's located near a volcano, and earthquakes are frequent. Also, it is very hot. On most days, the temperature reaches 115 degrees. The low temperatures occur during January and February, and the temperature then is 100 degrees. The people who live there mine for salt, and their home is nicknamed the Gateway to Hell. Would you want to live in any of these houses? Tell us which ones in the comments, and subscribe for more.